Hey folks, this is immigration attorney Hassan Abdullah here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm preparing this video to provide some insight into how you can qualify for an H1B visa for an occupation that normally requires a license, where you, the beneficiary, do not have a license, or if you're the petitioner, your employee doesn't have a license. How are you going to file an H1 petition and get that approved? That's the topic of this video, and I'm going to explain how it is possible in some professions. I'll give one example of a profession where it's not going to work, however. There's no exception to this for a lawyer. You need a license to practice law, and so you can't have someone do the duties of a lawyer without a license. And therefore, this idea, this solution doesn't work for that occupation. But there are other occupations, and the particular occupation I'm going to give, just as an example, is an architect. So when you graduate with a bachelor's degree in architecture, you're not yet an architect. You still need to have some experience, and then with that experience you're allowed to apply for a license to be an architect. So in the meantime, between being an architect and a recent graduate of architectural school, you're going to do some internships, gain experience, which is not a problem, but if you're a foreign national and you're trying to get an H1B, it may seem like a problem. But here's the solution. It starts with looking at the immigration regulations for H1B. In particular, 8 CFR 214.2 H4V C, which states the following. Duties without licensure. In certain occupations which generally require licensure, a state may allow an individual to fully practice the occupation under the supervision of licensed senior or supervisory personnel in that occupation. In such cases, the director shall examine the nature of the duties and the level at which they are performed. If the facts demonstrate that the alien under supervision could fully perform the duties of the occupation, H classification may be granted. So in other words, if the state allows you to perform the duties of that profession under the supervision of a licensed professional, then you can get an H1B approved in that occupation even if you don't have a license. You just have to prove that you're being supervised by someone at that company that is sponsoring you. You're being supervised by somebody who has a license. So in California, in particular, we look at Business and Professions Code of California 5500 first, and it says, as used in this chapter, architect means a person who is licensed to practice architecture in this state under the authority of this chapter. So as you can see, it says you can have the title, you can work as an architect if you have a license to practice architecture. But that's not where we stop our inquiry. We have to look at Business and Professions Code of California 5535.3, which gives us an exception. It says, this chapter does not prevent a corporation from furnishing or supplying by contract architectural services as long as any architect's professional services are offered and provided under the responsible control of a licensed architect or architects. So, in other words, this Business and Professions Code section tells us in California, if you are under the responsible control of a licensed architect or architects, you can render the services, professional services of an architect. And since 8 CFR 214.2 H4VC says that you can practice if the state allows you to without a license, you can get H1B if the state allows you to practice without a license under supervision of licensed professionals. So the way you tackle this in California, for example, or any state actually that does have such provisions and such permission, is you, first of all, you select the classification, the general classification as that of architects. And the job title, however, this is a practice pointer here, you don't want to use the job title of architect itself, because you're not necessarily an architect. Even though you're doing the duties of an architect, you're not using the title of architect. So an alternate job title would be architectural intern, or architect intern, or intern architect. And that's how you should file these petitions if you want them approved. You could do this the hard way, but the chances of a denial are higher, where you pick a different occupation, such as an architectural draftsperson, and you show that you've in the past hired only people with a degree in this occupation. But it's hit or miss, and you do have a reasonable chance of denial if you do it that way. So the best way is to see if your state does allow you to practice without a license, under supervision of a licensed person. But of course, you also should submit a copy of the license of the person who's going to supervise you at that architectural company. And if it's not the owner of the company, you would need to prove that that person works at the company, so you can use pay stubs, W-2s, things like that. At the same time, in the petition, it's a good idea to cite the CFR section I mentioned, and it's a good idea to cite the state law, the relevant state law. So that's how you do it. And this process can be done for different types of occupations where a license may be required. But you can practice under supervision of a licensed professional. So I hope this has been helpful. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.